Welcome to the podcast, where something is amiss, something is a mess, and we'll discuss some things MS, multiple sclerosis. This podcast is meant to tell the stories of those living day to day with MS, from before they were diagnosed, getting that diagnosis, the aftermath, and where they are today in their journey with multiple sclerosis. And now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to Some Things MS. Welcome back to our podcast, Some Things MS, where we're talking recently about, what's messy and what's amiss and kind of how things are for people living with MS. And so we've interviewed a ton of people who have MS, multiple sclerosis, and we're also interviewing people who are supporting people with multiple sclerosis. And to that, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Chris Lennert, who has been doing this for a long while and for the cause. And so excited to talk to him today about what he's doing and how he supports the MS Society. So welcome, Chris.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. By the way, my last name is Lennert.
Lennert. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. I did this the other day. I asked the gal before the podcast how to pronounce her name, and Lordy, just from the beginning, totally screwed it up. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's all good. That'll set the stage for the whole talk today.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, just out of the gate, outside of MS, just kind of what you do in life, and that we can set the tone there and then move into the other stuff.
Oh yeah. So I've been married to my wife for 27 years. We've been in Colorado for 25 of those. I have two kids. I'm almost empty nester. My oldest lives in Billings, Montana, and my youngest is in school, just finished his first year at Western in Gunnison.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then I've been at Left Hand Brewing for almost 19 years now.
Wow, that's good. Where'd you come from before Colorado?
Well, I actually worked in the outdoor industry, which is what got me to Colorado first. I worked for a company called Kelty Pack, and then I worked for Go Light. But when we moved here, my first house I bought was right up the street from the brewery, and so my wife and I would walk down here all the time. But before that, we're both from the Southeast. I'm from North Carolina originally. My wife's from Georgia, but we
Right
wanted
on.
to get out. We wanted to get out to the outdoors. We wanted to get out here, snowboard, climb, hike, ride, everything else. So yeah.
Yeah, it's got a lot to offer. I'm from just a little bit north of that. I grew up in Northern Virginia, a town called Falls Church.
Oh yeah, I know where you are.
Yeah, met my wife in Falls Church, and she was like, she's from Colorado. She's like, we've got to move back at some point. You're gonna love it, and for all those reasons, and plus our folks were here and everything. So it was tough for me to leave my people, but it's been a pretty decent living out here outside the Beltway. I mean, Beltway living is not great. A little too frenetic out there.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for that introduction. Let's talk about how you went from moving to Colorado, living down the street from Left Hand. You obviously joined them, and you've been doing it for quite a while. But let's talk about your kind of the genesis of how you got involved in Bike MS and why this is kind of your go forward cause.
Yeah, and so back in 2007, I had gotten a 2007, 2006, 2007. I got a road bike, and because I was pretty much a mountain biker, and a buddy of mine said, "Hey, do you want to do this? Now you have a road bike. Do you want to do this ride this summer?" I was like, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's this 2-day, 150-mile ride." And I was like, "That sounds horrible. Why the hell would anybody ever want to do that?" And and he goes, "Oh, but it's for this really good cause." I'm like, "What's it for?" And he said, "Oh, it's for the National MS Society." And I said, "Okay." And so my wife, one of her college roommates, dear friends, was diagnosed with MS probably 25 years ago. We used to run the Peachtree Road Race every
Okay.
year together. And then so I've had conversations, with him. And then we had unfortunately, he has since passed. We had a customer here in our tasting room for a long time when I first met him, he came in with a walker, and then he graduated right to a wheelchair, and then and graduated again to hand controls in his van. And I just remember talking to him one day, and I was like, so hey man, tell me about your MS. Like I know a little bit about it, but tell me a little bit more about it. And he says it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And
Interesting.
I was like, wait, what? What do you mean it's the best thing that's ever happened to you? And he said, I was so focused on me and my life and my career that I didn't focus on my family. I didn't focus on anything else. This made me stop down and basically stop and take a look and prioritize what was important to me. And that just really set it off for me. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So that first year, 2007, I actually did my first bike MS ride, and it wasn't with Team Left Hand. It was a friends and family team,
Okay.
and there were probably 15 or 16 of us. And I remember at the end of the year, I went up to the team captain, and it's interesting if you haven't read Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights book.
Okay.
I highly recommend it because he talks a lot about what when you turn a no into a yes, basically become a green light. Well, I went to her and I said, "Hey, how do I sponsor? How do I get Team Left Hand, or how do I get Left Hand Brewing part? I'd love to have our jersey or our logo on the jersey next year." And her comment to me, she had no idea what she was setting in motion at the time. But she said, "Nope, we only take cash." And that's when I said, "We're going to start our own team." So
Interesting.
I had a fellow employee here at the brewery. She had ridden by herself that year, and her and I sat down. I said, "Hey, what do we think about starting this team together?" So we started in 2008, and here we go all these years later. We've raised, I just updated our numbers, 7.745 million since 2008.
Wow, that's effing incredible, man. I mean, yeah, it just, I'm getting welled up just thinking about the impact you've made in this, short period of time on so many lives. And just interesting. I mean, in case you didn't know, I was diagnosed in 2005, so it's been about 2004, probably really with my first episode that I didn't know. Um, it's interesting. It didn't hit me that way right at the beginning. I was pretty tied into both family and work and everything, but it really is impactful. It does make you slow down and think when you're facing something like this. So it's really interesting to hear that aspect of this gentleman that you knew through the Left Hand Brewery, tap house there that hit him in that way. That to me is just it's wild to think about, something you wouldn't necessarily think about. Like you said, you take it back when you're talking about a serious disease, that this was actually a blessing in disguise that helped me to refocus and live out the rest of my years in a much different way than I would have.
Yeah, no, it definitely it was something where you're like, wow, I don't know if I would be as good as that, having that kind of perspective, right?
Yeah.
I think I
Because you
would
could
have.
jump off the other side of the cliff, which is the pity side, whereas like the poor me side, or why is this happening, and really go down a different path.
Exactly.
Um, as and this is just obviously a much healthier path for this gentleman. So 7 million. What's the number of riders at this point? Because we'll talk a little bit about kind of how you're across the country, but what's the total number of riders?
I track that too. I'm a spreadsheet guy, so we've
I love
had
it.
6,100 people ride with us in the 17 years.
Awesome. I love that spreadsheet. I am also a spreadsheet guy, and I've been a captain of the team, and I love to track the progress year over year and
Oh
see
yeah,
all the different aspects of how we fundraise from per dollar per person, kind of just all these different fun facts are always get at me because I'm a data and a spreadsheet person.
yeah.
Um, so you had the two, you and one other gal who had been riding. So since then, what did it take to get Left Hand fully bought into this? This is this is a very face forward part of the organization. What did that look like? How long did that take? What was the buy-in like?
Honestly, part of, Eric Wallace, co-founder of the brewery, he and I, when we first started doing it, he wasn't even a cyclist. It's funny. His first road bike is a Schwinn Peloton I sold him. It was the bike that I bought when my friend said, "Hey, do you want to do this ride?" And then when I graduated to a Specialized, I sold him my bike, and then he used it until he broke it, and then he's in. So
Funny.
the first couple of years, I mean, when he started the brewery back in '93, they didn't really have core values or anything, but we've since built it. So one of the
Yeah.
first things I kind of did here was kind of put a lot of structure behind that, and one of it is to give back to the communities where we work, live, and play. So Eric's
Yeah.
been doing that since day one. So
Awesome.
it wasn't really hard to get him to buy into it, because really, when we first started our first year, we had 25 riders, and that was it. And then second year we went to 65 riders, and then the third year we went to 88. And all of a sudden it was like, hold on, this thing is a wild stallion, and we just have to hold on to it. It's kind of like that
Yeah.
and now I'm showing you how old I am, but I love Calvin and Hobbes when Calvin rides the bike and he's holding on to the
Yeah.
post and he's holding on.
Yeah.
That's how I felt the first couple of years where it was out of control.
Yeah.
So honestly, it wasn't that difficult to get all in. And then we started slowly adding teams over the years. And it's been crazy going on ever since. But no, it wasn't that difficult to get in because once again, it was part of our ethos, and that's what I always struggle with when our fundraising kicks off and we're asking for sponsors. It's always shocking to me when people come back and they say, "No, I can't give you $500." Like, are you doing anything at all? I always
Yeah.
ask, like, I've been fortunate enough to speak to like my alma mater, the College of Charleston, and I've asked them before, like, before you go to work for a company and they're interviewing you, you should also interview them and say, what's your corporate giving like? What do you do
Yeah.
from a volunteer perspective? Because I think there's so many companies out there, maybe I'm wrong, that don't do anything.
Oh, I think there's probably predominantly, right? I mean, there's maybe a few, like you said, you have a few passionate people. Like maybe if I'm at a company and MS is my passion, I might drag one or two people with me. But unless the company's got it built in, like you said, to their mission statement, that's where it's tough to drag. Like I said, I built up um, a um, a charitable organization within my last end user company prior to where I am now, and they did have some focused value on that. It wasn't MS, but it was a worthy cause, and so it's got to be built in for sure. And it is a heavy lift if it's not, I'm guessing. So, and that's a great point, by the way. Aside, not an MS point, but just a life point. Don't be afraid to, if this is important to you, if charitable, organizational, that kind of stuff is important, you got to ask that up front because that might be the difference in what makes the job really, really hum for you. So how many rides now, or how many teams do you have nationwide?
Well, we used to have 8 up until this year. Now we have 6, and I don't know how well you or your listeners know, but the craft beer industry is definitely struggling right now. Uh,
Mm,
there's just so many choices. There's
yeah,
cans start off with hard seltzers, and then canned cocktails, and Delta 9 and everything else. So there's more choices than ever. So craft beer is definitely struggling. So I had to make the unfortunate call to part ways with 2 of our teams this year.
yeah.
So we're at 6 teams this year. So we are here, Florida, Texas, Ohio, California, and Washington.
Washington State.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's is that the Deception Pass ride?
It is. It's
Yeah.
awesome. I know you've
I
done.
love. I
Have you
haven't.
done?
Our team has. Yeah, our Coneheads. We've been up there as a team. We have actually over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we built up a decent team. Like for that area, like 15 people now, and we have a few people travel. It turns out in my personal life, I do some acting, so I do musical theater, and the weekend of Deception Pass is always the weekend of our show. Like it just turns out it kind of works out that way. So I'm hoping one of these years it'll be offset and I can do it because I've driven across Deception Pass, but it seems like it'd be an awesome ride.
It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And everybody, I mean, it is a lot hillier than you think it should be.
Yeah, yeah, no, it looks like it. In Ohio, my company that I currently work for is based out of Dayton, so I know there's a couple of Ohio rides, and I
There's
would
three.
definitely, yeah, I've got my eye. I'd love to join in one of those. If you're riding, I definitely jump on Team Left Hand and ride that one as a passport because I'm trying to do as many across the country as I can
Yeah.
too, just for the
Join
fun
us
of
in
it.
Ohio. We got a great team out there.
Yeah, yeah. I've met some folks at the last, maybe at the very last one, but maybe a couple rides ago, who are also riding in Colorado just for the fun of it from Ohio. So we're talking about that. So yeah, it looks like a fun ride too. So with all that, who's managing all these teams? Is this like your second day job? So you like leave Left Hand and go home and start managing bike rides?
Honestly, yes and no. And we have amazing committee members, right? So outside of 2 employees, everybody else is volunteer.
Hmm.
So I have, internally, I would say it's significantly more than just myself and one other person. We have a whole marketing team that's on the backside. Uh,
Okay.
I have 3 people in marketing. I mean, they design the jerseys, they design all the materials, they manage our website. I mean, I can't give them enough props
Yeah.
between Britt and Jill and Carly. They make all that work. So we design everything in house. I mean, it's nice to have that, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and then each team has a captain. If I look at like, California, we have, a captain there. His wife has MS, so it's personal for him. And then we
Yeah.
have committee members, that are volunteers, right? And then, I have the one guy, Jake, who's on my team and, here as an employee, and he helps me manage, a lot of logistics on the back end. And then Florida, I've got Carolyn. She's our team captain down there. When I first met her, she was just our team captain and a friend of mine. And then she has since been employed for us for the last couple of years. Um,
Awesome.
and then Ohio, we've had a lot of changes over the years, several captains, and that's okay. Life happens, things come and go. And so we've been amazing. We've got two great captains there. Once again, another committee. Texas, the Texas group, San Antonio based, we actually have three captains, Steve, Eileen, and Cisco. And it's interesting, Steve and Eileen, I met them here. They came up and did a passport ride years ago. And I just wound up meeting them, and they were a friends and family team
Okay.
that had slowly started decreasing over the years, and they
Mm,
were looking for a sponsor. Now they're our second largest team. They along with Florida, both of them have broke $1 million under the team left hand banner, which is awesome.
that's great.
And then if you go to Washington, it's our youngest team. And they are 100% dedicated to the mission. Most of them are out in Squim, which is like 2 hours outside of Seattle.
Okay.
We have a couple people based in Seattle,
Yeah.
which are awesome people as well. But Elizabeth has MS. So that's kind of get the structure for the teams. But we meet every month. We have, like, for instance, I have my Colorado committee meeting here on this coming Wednesday, no, tomorrow on Tuesday. But all the other committees or all the other teams, we do monthly Zoom or team calls. Uh,
Yeah.
I've got an agenda that I kind of go through, and we look at everything, from how many riders do we have, what's our sponsorship dollars look like, what's our events coming up, what are the Bike MS updates. Do we have any, does anybody from Bike MS themselves, join the call? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's a lot of work. I mean, for a while there, I was tracking all of that, but Bike MS is every single month with
Yeah.
16. I mean, we're meeting. I usually have, like I said, I usually have one call a month. So it's, an hour and a half. And there's committee notes that we send out, and then there's, all the teams go out, and then there's people on each committee. Like, we have our team captains, and then we have somebody that's in charge of the team tent. We have somebody that's in charge of going to get sponsorships. We have somebody that's in charge of food for our team tent. There's a lot of work, as you know, that
Yeah.
goes in behind the scenes. If you're just a rider and you show up and you raise your money and you're like, holy cow, this team tent's rad. It's awesome. It's got massage,
Yeah.
therapists, and it's got keg foot baths, and it's got food. And you're like, yeah, that was a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah.
Our committee members, I mean, and each team has its kind of, and I've never wanted to, I would say never. Years and years ago, we used to have a really big structure. We're like, we're going to do a movie night. We're going to do this, and we're going to do
Mhm.
that, and we're only going to have this. And that worked for a bit, but we basically changed it because we want each team is unique, right? Each team
Yeah.
has their own voice, and we want them to live their own voice. The only things that we do that are consistent across all the teams, one, we have a website. Two, we do jerseys, but we modify each jersey a little bit to kind of have a little bit of flair for each one of the teams. They usually have the team name called out. Obviously,
Yeah.
they have individuals, local sponsors on it. And then if we can, we try to make sure that the team tent theme is the same, so we can, ship materials between all the teams and sort of that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a huge amount of work that goes behind the scenes.
It's awesome. I think it insulates too. We were kind of talking just off the air before we got on, insulates your team so that it continues to move forward and motivate. If you just got one person, like if it truly was just Chris,
Oh my gosh,
that's
there's
yeah,
no way.
obviously, yeah, you're setting that up to fail at some point, likely, or and you don't want that because the mission is important, like you said.
Yeah.
We all should be doing something and building the structure around it, even though it seems. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing what you do for your 600 plus riders over those that many teams and being able to do it without having this organization in place.
Oh gosh,
Uh,
there's no
and
way.
and and I like and I like the note about allowing the team to be who it is because I ride on the Coneheads. We've been about a 50-person team. We like it at that level. it's a good level for us to manage without getting, up to that corporation where you are, where we're, it becomes more of a full-time endeavor. But it also, like you said, we've talked to folks like, oh yeah, we have like I said, we have a happy hour every month, and we have a party here. We do that, and it just that didn't work for us. We're just a group of like dedicated fundraisers who enjoy riding bikes, and we get together on this weekend for sure and do it. And then outside of that, we have training rides, but nothing really structured around that. Other than we do, like you said, monthly meetings for the core committee and doing all the background stuff that you talked about to ensure that the day of the weekend of is a successful one for our riders.
Yeah, and like for instance, in Colorado, which is our biggest team, right, where we started, and we do kickoff parties and we do year-end parties, and a lot of our other teams do it as well. And everybody has their own fundraising and that kind of thing. But it's funny, I've always said it's kind of the way we structured our teams has been if they have a good time, right? A lot of people start off like I can't raise 250 or 400 or whatever. And I remember the first year I did, and it was like $300, and I was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, how am I going to raise that? And I really struggled with it. But for over the years, I've always said if you take care of your team, they'll take care of everything else. If they
Yeah.
come in and they have, we have a lot of national sponsors, for team rides, snacks and fuel and that stuff before. Of course, it's always nice to have beer at the end of the ride. That's a big benefit to what we do. But if people come in and they're like, okay, team rides were fun. That's awesome. Okay, we did a happy hour of the fundraiser. And then like, oh my gosh, I walked in the team tent. That was so much fun. Yeah, I got my butt kicked or whatever, or I rode one day or whatever. It doesn't matter. Because I
Yeah.
always said like, the ride weekend is a celebration of the fundraising, or at least I think it should be. But if people have a good time and they're like, oh my gosh, that was awesome, most likely they'll come back next year. And we kind of have, and the one thing I was going to say earlier that I didn't was, we have 3 guiding principles is kind of what we lay out. We haven't, by the way, we also have a national captains summit. We do a virtual. We used to do it in person, and then COVID happened, and then we just haven't switched away from it. But we do a
Yeah.
national captains summit. It's 3 to 4 hours on Zoom. We go through all of our, how'd last year look for each one of the teams, and how did, what are we looking forward for this year? What are everybody's goals? And we talk about, we usually watch a video or two from the MS Society, and we talk about jerseys, and we talk about fundraisers, and we try to get best practices from each one of the teams. But I always start each one of the captains summits off with our 3 guiding principles, which are number 1, be mission focused. I'm just going to read them to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do our part to stop MS in its tracks, restore what's been lost, and end MS forever. 2, focus on fundraising. This is what it's all about, raising as much money as
Yeah.
possible. And then number 3, grow our teams. In order to accomplish number 2, we need to grow our teams being inclusive to all. And what I mean by
Right.
that is I don't care whether you're a hardcore hammerhead and you're throwing 25 miles per hour down, or you've never been on a bike and you're riding an e-bike and you're riding 8 to 9 miles an hour and you do 20 miles. I don't care. If you're coming in and you're going to ride, awesome. But ultimately, even if you're not going to ride and you're going to be a virtual fundraiser, you're going to raise money. Once again, it's all about the fundraising. And that's one of the things I got lit up years ago on one of the MS Facebook sites because I've always said, like, when I get asked, when people say, when you cruise into a rest stop and they say, and I'm always like, hey, thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Like, thanks for riding. I can ride any weekend, any place,
Yeah.
honestly. It's really about thank you for the fundraising. And
Yeah.
I actually posted that on one of the Facebook sites, and I'll probably get in trouble for this again. But
He's stirring up the controversy.
I posted on the team comment, like the team captain's page, and I said that, and man, people just lit me up about that. They should be able to say whatever they want, and I'm like, it's about the fundraising. That's all I was trying to say. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
thank you for fundraising, because I think that's what it ultimately boils down is the money that we raise. Period.
It's a nuanced focus. I mean, I've heard this similar thing when somebody says I'm trying to lose weight, and people's like, I don't want to find it again. I'm not losing it. I'm getting rid of it.
Right.
It's a
Right.
nuanced mind difference in how you go about, it's like, hey, I am riding, but the important thing again, what should be forward is the fundraising. And that's a quick moment to talk about what would you suggest for people who are, like you said, this is a, common theme when people are just starting. A couple of things. I'm going to jump way back and say, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Some dude or some gal just said, hey, I'm riding this thing this weekend. You want to join? He's like, yeah, let me go scrounge up a bike somewhere and ride with you. and you end up with like my first bike was a
Yeah.
80s Steely Specialized. I bought it on Craigslist when somebody invited me to bike ride, and I rode it for a number of years until I needed something better, right?
Yep.
And so that is just a common theme. But also, how am I going to raise $300? Now it's $400. How do I raise $400? That seems like a lot for me to ask, from the world. So what's your like top 3 fundraising tips, or more if you have more, or less if you have less. But what's your top fundraising ideas?
My first one is always ask early and ask often. That's the biggest one. Number two, I would say, is don't never assume somebody's answer. Ask anyway.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know if I should ask that person. Why not? All they can do is say no or ignore you. And then this one is also a little bit. I think this one is a little controversial too. Um, don't ask, "Hey, just skip that cup of coffee." Yeah. Or, hey, give me $10. If you ask somebody for $10, they're going to give you some. They're going to give you $10.
yeah,
Let them decide what they want to give you, right?
yeah,
So I never suggest that. And then, in terms of, we have our own website, by the way. It's teamlefthand.com.
yeah.
We actually added a fundraising tips section on our website now,
Oh,
so anybody
cool.
can refer to that. But we have, we focus on what we call the 4 Ps of fundraising, which is passion, persistence, philanthropy, and people focused. And I'd say the biggest thing, and it was interesting, I actually fought with my committee members about doing this. And the reason why is because people I've heard over the years, hey, can you send me your template so I can send out that email? And I'm like, I've never been a big fan. I always like when I look at the MS site where it's the basic template language.
Yeah,
I always change that personally, and I know why they do that so they can give people an idea. But I'm a huge storyteller. I love telling stories, and I always tell people, "What's your story? Why are you writing? Why are you connected with it?"
yeah,
And I always tell people after the kickoff, I'm like, you just heard this amazing speaker, or you just met somebody that had MS, or whatever it happens to be. You have a story. What's your story? People donate to you, they donate to the story, they donate why. They're not just like, if you just send out a basic template that comes from me or from MS, maybe you'll get some money, but you got to tell your story.
yeah. That's huge, man. I mean, like you said, having that personal, and in business life, I do this. I'm a relationship builder, and the same thing. Like I could use AI to craft a message,
Yeah.
but I choose to tell the story the way I like to tell it. I think that gives me some advantage. It takes more time,
Yep.
but at the end of the day, I think I like that connection. I like learning about a person and then being able to use that in the storytelling. And so I think the same goes for here. Like you said, if you get, yeah, it's a crapshoot, right? Like you say, you could send your templated thing out and get some decent response, and maybe that works for you. But just imagine if you start layering in, oh, the reason I do this is because every time I go to this ride, I'm at the finish line and people are stumbling and flying across and they're crying, and just the emotion around this is so impactful for me. Even though I don't have MS, I'm still doing this because, I mean, that's the kind of storytelling that people, that are reading this, like, wow, this is the difference in, like, hi friend, please do this, because, like, because of these stats. Yeah, much different way to go about it. I appreciate that. That's a good call out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, anything else we haven't talked about? I mean, we've covered a lot. I really appreciate your time. If you have anything else you want to add, when I drop this, um, uh, and publish it, I'll make sure we put in some links to your website and to your team fundraising page for all your different rides, so people can find you and donate if they want to.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say, I would be remiss without a couple things. One other tip for teams would be, and I fought against it for years, and then I'm like, why did I fight against it? Getting sponsors. I mean, putting sponsors on your jersey. I know some people don't like to do that. And granted, once again, I know we have a marketing team that designs our jersey every year, but we've
yeah,
raised over $500,000 just on sponsors over the years. And that's crazy. And then we take all that money and we divide it amongst our team members. So, for instance, I just sent the request in to Sheila at the MS Society, saying, "Hey, I need to split these dollars with all of our team members." So every team member in Colorado is going to get $188 this year from our corporate sponsors, um,
awesome.
and that's almost half the fundraising, right?
Yeah,
Um, So, big shout out to all of our sponsors, and then our committee members, as I kind of said, not just the captains, but the committee members. Oh my gosh, we couldn't do it without them. So many amazing volunteers that do so much work in our team tents,
Yeah.
that are just unbelievable. I mean, from Donna in Florida to Rosie and Josh in Ohio. I mean, I could go on and on and on with all the teams. I mean, we just couldn't do it without all of them.
Yep.
And then the last thing I always want to say is the MS staff that's on the ground during our rides. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
they're the true heroes. They're the
Yeah,
ones
man.
that make it all work. Because I think a lot of people don't see all the stuff that they do, loading up and unloading and all that stuff. The people on the ground on the front lines for our bike MS rides always give it up to them, because yeah, we see the weekend, but we don't see all the weeks that going into advance and all the route coursing and the laying out
Yeah.
the tents and all that stuff. So I just want to say once again, give it up to them, because without them and the work that they do, I think that they're not appreciated enough. And I'll stop there.
You're so right. I mean, you like you said, you're in the weekend. Number one, you're obviously if you're riding the full thing, you're riding 75 miles in a day. You get back, you're pretty tired. You kind of you lose sight maybe of all the folks that are they're like clapping you across the finish line, setting up the food, and it goes beyond MS. For us in Colorado, it's the folks at CSU for now that are doing those volunteers that are there, all of the outside volunteers. I mean, it just continues to spiral out, all these people that are dedicated to this weekend that we're riding for. And yeah, definitely want to keep that in mind. I'm going to finish with I do a fast 4 questions. They're just going to be a quick shot. Yes or no, quick answers just for fun. Nuggets or abs, or both. But do you have a preference? We got both in the playoffs right now. Where are you leaning?
Well, I mean, the Avs are the only third seed to make it through. Every other bracket had 1 and 2. So I'm
Okay.
pretty confident that the Avs are gonna go pretty far. The Nugs, whew, that was a rough loss the other night. So we're not playing our best basketball right now.
Yeah.
And I'm a little concerned with the Timberwolves because they're on fire.
Yeah. Right on. Current favorite left-hand beer for
Oh
you? I
man,
can't say all time because there's so many, right? But
the
your
one
current
that's in
favorite.
front of me, the one that's in front of me. I mean, you're asking me, are you an only child? Is one of my favorite goals. Are you an only child?
All right. Exactly. Yeah. So which kid are you picking?
Yeah, I can't pick my favorite child. I love both
No.
of them. So it's just like with beers. Like you're asking me to pick my favorite child. I can't do that.
My favorite of all time was I love the Good Juju. That was one of
Oh
my
yeah,
favorite beers. Yeah, that was a
we
good
we
one.
still make that beer seasonally, but it's pretty much just Colorado only.
Yeah, yeah, I'll see it every once in a while. Yeah, just so you know, I've asked this question of pretty much everybody. What do you think? What do you think the top beer choice has been? If you had to take a guess, I've interviewed 7 people and it's been 6-1.
So you're saying like, what's the favorite? Our number one selling beer or favorite beer at like a bike and mess ride?
Favorite beer that of the people I've interviewed, I've asked the same
Oh,
question, and we've had a 6-1 choice ratio.
I
And
I would say it was Wheels Goes Round when we used to make that beer, but we don't make that beer anymore. So, I mean, based on what I would say on people's, I mean, we're known for Milk Stout Nitro. It's our 50% of our sales, but based on what people drink today, it's IPA.
it was Milk Stout. That was the number one choice. Yep.
Yes.
There was a couple IPAs like, oh, and I also like the IP
Yeah.
but Milk Stout was typically the number one. And last question, what's your dream car to if you're looking,
The
no
one I'm
money
driving
involved,
the one I'm driving right now, it's paid off.
which is it's paid off. I love it.
It's a Toyota FJ Cruiser that only has 200,000 miles on it. So I've just
That's the
broken in.
best.
Got another 300,000 to go.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate having you on, Chris. It was
Yeah,
fun.
thank
I
you.
learned a lot. I think this would be a good episode for people to dig into. If you're starting a team, if you're involved in a team, and you want to kind of ramp it up. A lot
Have
of good
them reach
information on
out to me
fundraising.
too. Have them reach
Pardon?
out to me if anybody wants to send me an email and I can help them on a team perspective on terms of what we do. Chris at lefthandbrewing.com. Pretty easy. Anybody reach out to me, and if I can help you, I will.
Awesome, man. We appreciate that. Thanks again, and thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.